Okay, so good evening. We're picking up from chapter 19 in Sefer Yehoshua. We are deep into the division of Eretz Yisrael. It's important to note that tonight we're going to talk about the rest of the division to the other 7 tribes, beginning with Shimon and moving through all the way to the tribe of Dan. And it's important to note that although the different territories are described over here, the actual possession of those territories did not take place right now necessarily. It's going to describe some land that was conquered after the death of Yehoshua, sometimes many years after the death of Yehoshua. Yehoshua just wanted before his death to make sure everyone knew where they were going, and they surveyed the land and they apportioned the land, but the actual conquering of each individual plot or territory for the tribes, that didn't necessarily occur immediately. And that is actually the fault of Bnei Yisrael, who were a little bit lackadaisical in the conquering of the land, because perhaps they were overly comfortable, or they were a little bit nervous of going off on their own to fight these terrifying armies. Whatever the reason is, they delayed in conquering land until after the death of Yehoshua, and they never really succeeded until many years later, when King Solomon was able to build the temple. And we mentioned last time that the building of the temple is dependent on the ultimate conquering and settling of all the debts in the land. You have to make sure the land is totally conquered and everybody inherits it. And once we're at rest, Batem el Menucha, as the Torah refers to it, at that point we can build the temple. But until then, we have the tabernacle in Shiloh, the Mishkan. So that's just an important note that we'll be discussing tribal divisions here, although the actual division might not occur practically until later on. So we have the interesting portion of the tribe of Shimon. Shimon, because of his behavior in this past week's parsha, Shimon and Levi got together to take revenge on the city of Shechem for what happened to their sister Dinah. Shechem abducted Dinah, the daughter of Yaakov, the sister of Shimon and Levi. He abducted her and he insisted on marrying her. So Shimon and Levi plotted and tricked the entire city of Shechem to get a bris milah. And when they were weak from their surgery, Shimon and Levi, incredibly powerful people, they went and wiped out the entire city for having abducted their sister, and everybody else for sitting by idly and not doing anything about it. So this was a very hot-headed, vengeful type of thing to do. So the blessing, or the final words of Yaakov addressing Shimon and Levi, and the end of his life was, Shimon and Levi, you are brothers, and your rage is a cursed thing. Your wrath is dangerous, and I don't want you guys to convene again and to come to a position of power where you can cause tremendous damage. So Yaakov said, Afitzam beYisrael, achalkem beYaakov. I'm going to scatter them amongst the Jews to kind of neutralize their power, that they won't have the ability to join together and do as much damage as they've done here. So this is manifest in the apportionment of the land of Israel. Levi, as we know, did not get a single plot of land, but as we'll find out in chapter 21, they're going to be scattered cities, 42 or 48 different cities where the Levites can live, scattered throughout the entire Israel. And that is a fulfillment of Yaakov's blessing or curse, that they will not have a single place to live together. And similarly, Shimon did not get a unified plot of land. In fact, he was totally omitted from the lottery process. You recall there was 2 boxes, one with the plot of land and one with the name of the tribe. Right, the tribe of Zebulun gets in this plot of land. You would take out 2 different papers. That was the process of the lottery to inherit the land. Shimon's name was not in the lottery box. Shimon did not get his own special portion in the land. Rather, what happened was they said, Shimon, because of Yaakov, our father's declaration, you will not get your own portion. Rather, we'll draw lots to see which tribe is going to host you. And they drew lots, and sure enough, Shimon was going to be hosted by Yehuda. The tribe of Judah in the south of Israel. They had that huge portion in the south, mostly desert. They were the ones who were going to put up most of the tribe of Shimon, and Shimon had scattered cities in the south of Yehuda. That is the portion of Shimon. Now, on the one hand, this is in order to limit Shimon's power, limit his ability to have an uprising. If things get heated, we want to diminish Shimon's ability to fight. On the other hand, Rashi in Chumash and also in Divrei Hayamim, Rashi notes that Shimon historically were teachers of Torah and scribes. This is a position, it's a vocation which requires people to travel a lot. You need to hire a teacher. So if you live in the land of Naphtali, all the way up in the north of Israel, you'd hire a teacher from Shimon and he'd go traveling over there. And you live in Dan in the west, Dan would hire the teachers of Shimon and they have to go travel over there. So the tribe of Shimon, not only were they scattered in the official land that they received in Israel, but even their jobs required them constantly traveling and being on the go, further diminishing their ability to unite and start some, like a rebellion army or something like that, or to, what do you call that? Vigilantes, right? Going out and fighting, doing their own thing. It's further diminishing them. Number one, they're scattered amongst the land of Israel because of their inheritance, but even their jobs cause them to be constantly on the move. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky points out something interesting. Yes, it diminishes their power, but on the other hand, this also gives Shimon tremendous influence over people. To be a teacher and to be a scribe, you're constantly mixing together with everybody else. Yeah, those kinds of people that are moving north, south, east, west, they're going to all the various territories of Israel, they will actually end up having quite a bit of influence. The teachers who teach our children, they are tremendous influences on our children, whether we like it or not, right? That's why you have to take parent-teacher conference night seriously. That happened this week. Yeah, teachers have a big influence on the entire generation.
Were there famous people came out of Shevet Shimon?
That's a good question. I'm sure there were, but I can't think of any at the moment. I'm sure there were. As God willing, as we continue through Tanakh, we'll find out some more personalities. But Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky points out, on the one hand, we're trying to diminish their power. On the other hand, we're also putting them in a position of influence where they can go and teach others and influence them. And he says that's because Shimon and Levi had a valuable quality after all. Yes, they were hot-tempered, and yes, they overdid it by wiping out the whole city of Shechem in such a serious and final manner. On the other hand, they were showing tremendous courage, tremendous care for the honor of Hashem and for the honor of the Jewish people, which was desecrated with the action of Dinah. That zealousness is not something to be pushed aside. That we want a little bit of that in every Jew. So on the one hand, we're going to diminish their power and neutralize it. On the other hand, we're going to scatter them around so they can influence others and give them a little bit more of that kick, that fight in them. So it's a balance of how much of the quality of Shimon and Levi we want to imbue into the rest of the Jewish people, while on the other hand, we want to hold them back from doing too much damage. A very fascinating thing borne out in the inheritance of the land. Yes, so in short, chapter 19 summarizes Shimon's territory. It's scattered amidst the cities of Yehuda. In Yehuda's territories in the south, this is the beginning of chapter 19, I should say. In Yehuda's territories in the south, there's a bunch of cities for Shimon, and their jobs also entailed a lot of travel and going back and forth, again, so that they wouldn't have the power, the ability to form their own hot-tempered group. Okay, now we continue with the other portioning out of the land. And you'll notice the order that it happens is not a geographical one. It's not like we're moving from south further north until we get to the tip, or from west to east, or vice versa. It's not a geographical order, but some other order is being employed. Yehuda went first, we said, because he had the special ability to do teshuvah, and he set the example of teshuvah, so he gets the land first. And then you had Yosef, who also was able to show his fortitude in this week's Parsha Vayeshev. Yosef's moral fortitude enabled him to become a leader amongst the Jews, and he gets second. Binyamin, where the Beis Hamikdash is, sandwiched in between Yehuda and Shimon. So we're not going in a geographical order, we're going in a conceptual or maybe a spiritual ranking order, which brings out some interesting points here. Let me pull up one of our many beautiful maps that we can draw from. And just to show you a little bit of this. Oops. Okay. So here we have, we're on the left. Oh, I always pull up the wrong map. How did that happen? This is not the one I wanted. Let me stop sharing. Oh, here, even better. I have a colorful one for us. Okay, here we are. Here's a nice color picture. Do you see this of the division of the land?
Yeah, it says pinch out. I'm going to try that.
What'd you say?
It says to pinch out the image.
Oh,
There we go.
that better? Okay. So here in the south, we had Judah. He was the first to inherit. And Shimon, again, this is all rough estimates. We don't know exactly the precise borders and boundaries. But this is approximately, you have Shimon scattered amidst Yehuda over here. Next in line was going to be Zevulun. Zevulun is here more towards the north. Okay. The truth is this map is inaccurate. According to most opinions, Zevulun inherited on the Kinneret shore over here. This little water is the Kinneret, and Zevulun's territory stretched all the way to the east, and they inherited in this area. Okay. Listed next is south of Zevulun is Issachar. Over here, also in the northeast, towards the northeast, along the Jordan River. Yeah, is this more or less legible and clear, visible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then we're going to move on to Asher. Asher is this pink plot in the northwest, more or less. And then we have Naphtali in the northeast, all the way to the furthermost north part of Israel. And then finally we have tribe of Dan, which was along the western coast. Excuse me, that's Manasseh. Here, this light blue one over here would be Dan. Okay, those are the ones that are left that we have not read about, and they're all spoken out in chapter 19. So a few notable things here. So here's just once again, a few notable things. The first thing I want to pick up on is the order of Zevulun and Yisachar. This is not the first time that we see Zevulun going before Yisachar. Zevulun, in the blessings of Yaakov Avinu, in the blessings of Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of his life, they always put Zevulun in front of Yisachar. But the actual age order was Yisachar and then Zevulun. The reason is these two tribes, these two brothers and tribes had a unique partnership, which we don't really find so frequently. And that's known as, they are the paradigm of the Yisachar-Zevulun relationship. Zevulun were the businessmen. They worked along the coast. They were farming techeles, which we need for our tzitzis, and they were the businessmen. They earned the money and they supported Yisachar, the tribe of Yisachar, so that Yisachar could sit and learn. Yisachar is referred to in the blessings as a chamor, a donkey who carries the load, carrying the load of learning, to sit and learn and put all the pieces together and figure out, proper Torah. That's a lot of work. So Zevulun took off the financial burden. He removed the financial burden from Yisachar to enable them to learn. And they actually split the spiritual profits. Yes, Zevulun said to Yisachar, you do the learning, I'll do the business, but we'll split the profits. This is the deal that they had. And very notably, Zevulun, who enabled the learning of Yisachar, they go first. As if to say that the supporters of Torah and the ones who enable the Torah learning, in a certain sense, are even greater than the ones who do the learning. Yes? Now, practically, this type of relationship is actually codified in the Shulchan Aruch. And it says that it's important to recognize that this business of basically they're selling their spiritual merits, aren't they? So can I go now and I'll say, I spent a couple of years in yeshiva, but I'm strapped for cash. So to the highest bidder, I will sell a portion of my yeshiva learning that I did in my 20s. I'll sell 2 years of my learning, whatever spiritual merits I accrued. I want to sell that, for a few $100,000 to the highest bidder. Am I allowed to do that? Is that effective in the spiritual way? It's probably silly because no amount of money is worth a moment of Olam Haba. But the Shulchan Aruch writes that is not effective. You cannot sell a spiritual asset. It's impossible. If it's already been earned, and it's already done, there's no way that merit is going to transfer to somebody else. The reason this worked, Yisachar and Zevulun, is because they made the condition before the learning ever happened. Before Yisachar accrued the spiritual merits, Zevulun said, I want to give you the ability to do the learning. He's putting down the money and enabling Yisachar to go and sit in the yeshiva and learn. Since that happened beforehand, that they made this deal, then from here and forward, all of the learning will also count towards Zevulun's share, spiritual portion. Okay, it's an interesting type of deal, and you should consult. If you ever want to take on a deal like this, not recommended. You have to do a lot of consultation and figure out you're doing it right and all that stuff. But it's a very fascinating type of deal that they went through. And again, I'm noting it here because Zevulun comes before Yisachar, even though age-wise it was flipped, because Zevulun is the one that supported. And the support of Torah is not a small thing. And finally, so Asher and Naphtali, as we said, are in the northwest, northeast, respectively. And then Dan comes last. Dan, the tribe of Dan, always comes last. The way the Jews traveled in the desert, Dan was also the last tribe in line. Dan was known as the Me'asef Lekol HaMachanot, the gatherer of all of the camp. What does that mean? Anybody who lagged behind, they would end up joining the tribe of Dan. Oh, hey, I lost my shoes and I got delayed half an hour. I couldn't leave with my tribe today. You're going to end up with the tribe of Dan. They were the guys, they swept the back of the camp. Any lost objects that people had in the desert were basically found by the tribe of Dan, because they were the last group traveling and they would see everything that people left behind. Anybody who left the camp from the back would have to come back in through the tribe of Dan. They're always the gatherer. Spiritually speaking, that means that they're in a very low place, but they have access because of their proximity to outside the camp. They have a special ability to draw in even somebody who's very lowly. This is manifest, we'll get to it, God willing, the book of Judges coming soon. This is manifest in the life of Shimshon, Samson, the great warrior of the Jewish people and the judge of the Jewish people. He was from the tribe of Dan. And his special ability was to go behind enemy lines, to marry the Philistine lady, and through that, redeem, so to speak, the spiritual captives of the Jews, to convert the women who were embedded amongst the non-Jews, and also do the special job of taking down our enemies in that very dark and unholy place, in the very land of the Philistine, in their very territory. He would go into their place and to do the job. And that was perhaps because he was from the tribe of Dan, who was all the way in the back, all the way almost to the edge of the clouds of glory, and sometimes would even fall out behind. That was a special status and ability of Dan. So being on the bottom is not necessarily a bad thing. It gives you a special access to the lower down people. For example, if you want to teach, sorry, go ahead.
Just answer my question.
Yeah.
About Issachar, I think. Anybody?
Very good. Yeah. Are there any famous personalities from Shimon? Yeah. So I have one from Dan. Yeah. Famous personality of Dan would be Shimshon.
Yeah.
An example of this phenomenon would be if you have a student that is struggling. So it's not the best idea usually to bring the sharpest, brightest boy in the class and have him teach the student, because he's going to be talking about, the calculus, and this student is having a problem with basic math. How are you going to explain these high level concepts to a student who's struggling? What you'd rather do is you get somebody in their range of development. You get a student who's a little bit better than the bottom, and he can lift up his fellow. It's similar with the tribe of Dan. Although they are, whatever it means, they're a drop lower in the spiritual plane, they can lift up the other ones who have fallen low behind and do the job that even the higher level people are not able to. This is super generalizing, right? Anybody within any tribe could be higher or lower, but this is just the special power of Dan, as the commentaries describe, primarily when they talk about Shimshon. Okay, there is now an interesting thing about Dan in verse 47, I believe. Yeah, it says, the boundary of the children of Dan was not sufficient for them, so they ascended and battled with Leshem and conquered it. Like we saw last week with the children of Yosef, Dan also said, hey, my land is not big enough. Too little land for too many people. I need more. So, according to most opinions, what happened here is they annexed an additional part of Israel, but it was all the way in the northeastern tip. And now I can use the wonderful book I got from Mr. Wilpert and show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, this is a map of Israel, and it has a lot of different cities there. So I want to show you, this is the south. Down here was my cursor. Down here is the south. I'm going to zoom in a moment, you'll see. Dan, more or less, is around this area. Okay, that's why the Dan bus runs in Tel Aviv. I think the name of the bus company is Dan, isn't it? Because that's the area of the tribe. But when they ran out of space, look where they went. They went and conquered Leshem, which is all the way at the very northeastern tip of Israel. Do you see over here where it says Dan, where my cursor is? Do you see that? It's all the way at the northeastern tip. Meaning to say, if you were to follow the Jordan River all the way to the northernmost point, you would end up in a separate city of Dan. So to put it in the other map that we saw, let me know if this works. Do you now see the new map with the colorful tribes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, over here is the regular area of Dan, this teal area, teal colored thing. They inherited in the tribe of Naphtali, one city here in the corner they annexed. It was not officially part of Israel. And they annexed this portion where it says Dan. This should be also their color. And that's the very top of the Jordan. So they kind of had two different areas where they lived.
So how could they the area?
What did you say?
How did they the area? I mean, it was all spoken for, so to speak.
Yes. So there seems to be a debate here. It sounds like either it was not actually part of Israel and they annexed it. After they conquered everything, they added another piece. And that is officially allowed. If after conquering Israel, you now want to annex and expand your borders, you can do that. And it looks like that's what happened over here. Some commentaries, if I'm not mistaken, they say, like the Radak, for example, he mentions an opinion that this was always part of Israel, and Dan always had this tip over here.
I see Chatzor there.
Yeah, it's a place we learned about earlier. That was like the main gathering place of the non-Jews in the north who came to battle against us, of the Canaanites in the north.
That's archaeological site, Chatzor. There was been a lot of work there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot to dig up. Maybe just the history that we've been reading over here. It would imply tons of action in that area.
What is the name of this city that Dan took?
He battled with Leshem and conquered it. Leshem, yeah.
Is this what is described in the book of Judges, the next to the last narrative in the book of Judges called the Danite incursion?
Excellent. That is exactly it. Exactly it. In fact, Mrs. Fox, in fact, the Abarbanel writes that since this event did not happen in the lifetime of Yehoshua, it actually happened in the book of Judges. How did this verse even get here?
Yeah.
Joshua wrote the book of Joshua. So how on earth did he write about an event that never even occurred until decades later? So the Abarbanel writes that it was later inserted into the book of Joshua to make it more complete when it talks about the division of the land. It's a fascinating tidbit that there's verses in Joshua that were added later and became part of the book after the death of Joshua. So there's two fascinating things about this. Number one is, we'll later find an expression, and maybe you've heard it before. When somebody wants to describe the entire expanse of Israel, they'll say, Midan ve'ad Beersheva. For example, there was no man as handsome as Saul, Midan ve'ad Beersheva, from Dan till Beersheva. So until what we just learned, that would not be such a wide range of place. Beersheva is down here, if you see my cursor still, and Dan's over here. Yeah, that leaves a great portion of Israel where people could be more handsome than Saul. But that expression, Dan ve'ad Beersheva, is referring to this. The northeastern tip of Israel is referred to as Dan until Beersheva, which is the southern, basically the southernmost point of Israel. That accounts for that expression. Dan ve'ad Beersheva is from that extra added part of Dan until Beersheva. Now we can appreciate that expression. It's also part of a few famous Israeli songs, if you indulge in those. And now we can appreciate that expression. It's not referring to Dan on the western coast of Israel. It's referring to Dan in the northeastern part of Israel. Another very impactful thing here is the name of the Jordan River. In Hebrew, it's Yarden. That is actually like a contraction of two words, Yored Dan. It goes down, it issues forth from Dan. That's what the word Yarden means. Jordan. Meaning it issues forth from Dan. What does that mean? How could the Jordan River issue forth from Dan, which is on the opposite side of Israel? It's referring to, once again, the northeastern tip of Israel, is this new city of Dan. And from that area, actually, the Jordan issues forth and runs down all the way south, along the south of Israel. Yeah, do you hear that? Isn't that illuminating?
Yeah.
So the name Jordan is thanks to our chapter 19 in Joshua, because the Jordan River issues from this annexed part of Israel called the city of Dan, Leshem. Okay, and finally in chapter 19, it says, thus, in verse 49, thus they finished apportioning the land according to its borders. They divvied everything out. They decided who goes where. And then finally, Bnei Israel gave a heritage to Yehoshua within their midst. Meaning to say, Joshua himself, he stood back the whole time. He first made sure that the entire Bnei Israel was taken care of. Everybody has their place to live. And then they said to him, our dear leader, what about you? He said, oh, me? Sure, I'll take something. And they gave him a portion in their midst in the tribe of Ephraim, where he was from. By the word of the Shem, they gave him the city that he requested, Timnat Serach in Mount Ephraim, and he built the city and dwelt there. The Talmud says that the place where he lived, after he inherited it, it became one of the greatest producer. The land was blessed and produced abundant crops thanks to his possessing it, and which is such an Israel thing, that the land responds to the spiritual state of the person who possesses it. That is a very Jewish Israel type of experience. And the other person that didn't, so the Gemara also in the same place there says there's two people who were not part of the lottery inheritance which the Jewish people had, and that would be Joshua, as we see here. He got a special portion handed to him, and Caleb, who got Hebron earlier. He was given Hebron on account of what he did with the spies way back when. He stood aside from them and he went to go pray in Hebron, and he got Hebron. Those two individuals were excluded from the lottery process, and they had a special portion granted to them directly. And the Ben Ish Chai on that piece of Talmud explains, since they separated themselves for the sake of God, when the spies were plotting to speak Lashon Hara about Israel, Yehoshua and Caleb, who were amongst them, They separated themselves from that group of evildoers. So too now, Hashem is separating them for good. All of Bnei Israel gets according to the lottery, and they get special status, separated from everybody else, and given land directly from the mouth of God, which is a very special honor you can imagine. Okay, so this, God willing, has brought us to the end of the division of the land of Israel. What's left is the cities of refuge and the Levite cities. There's going to be 6 cities of refuge altogether, 3 on the eastern side of the Jordan and 3 in Eretz Israel proper. We'll see that in chapter 21, in chapter 20, excuse me. And in chapter 21, we'll have the other 42 Levite cities and where they are apportioned. So it's a long list of city names, and I'll show you a map, God willing, when we next learn. And then finally, it will be time for the 2.5 tribes to go back to the east of the Jordan, and they're going to say goodbye to everybody, and then we say goodbye to Yehoshua. So we're really heading towards the end of the book of Yehoshua here. We're at the tail end of it, and God willing, we'll pick up next time. Next week is Hanukkah, and that might affect our schedule. So I'll send out an email earlier in the week if anything changes with the Thursday night class. Okay.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Have a great night.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the map once again.